All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children. Men will die for their wives and children. And God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts, the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendus est. Psychology's Wokest Turn, The Breakdown of Reason and Sanity. Written by Conrad, Riker. Available now, links in description. Evolutionary biology, psychology. How to read the pattern before it reads you. I never said you did anything wrong. I said, it says a lot that you reacted that way. I watch men hear this and immediately assume a defensive crouch, scrambling to prove their innocence against a charge that was never formally filed. They misread the sentence entirely because they treat emotional ambushes like courtroom cross-examinations, searching for a logical refutation to a feeling that has already been weaponized into a silent verdict. The trap is not in what she claims you did, but in the unspoken demand that you must intuitively disprove a crime she refuses to name. Panic, pleading, and rational debate all fail catastrophically because they validate her underlying premise that your reactions are her property to judge and your emotional state is hers to govern. When you argue the facts of a phantom accusation, you step blindly into the role of the supplicant, begging for an absolution she has no intention of granting. You cannot win a struggle session by adhering to the rules of due process when the judge has already decided your existence is the offense. The only solution is translation under truth, a deliberate refusal to play the psychiatrist's game of diagnosing ghosts. You must strip the therapeutic fog from her words and force the hidden demand into the light of day, demanding a specific, actionable claim rather than accepting a mood as evidence. Like an elemental purification cutting through infection, grammar and plain speech act as the scalpel that exposes the emotional blackmail. The phrase, I never said you did anything wrong. I said, it says a lot that you reacted that way. Speaker context, a fictional wife in a tense domestic conversation. Surface, meaning, she says she wants support or understanding. Hidden demand, she wants him to infer, reassure, and accept guilt without a defined claim. Core contradiction. She wants leadership and mind reading while rejecting direct instruction and accountability. Phrase map. Phrase quote. I never said you did anything wrong. I said, it says a lot that you reacted that way. Speaker context. A fictional wife in a tense domestic conversation. The chronology is paramount. She initiated a strike, covert or overt, and awaited his submission. Before the explanation appeared, she wanted preemptive compliance and emotional capitulation. When he instead offered resistance or boundary enforcement, the script flipped. Surface meaning. She claims the mantle of objective neutrality. The ostensible message is that his original action is pardoned. The problem is purely his subsequent emotional display. She frames herself as a reasonable observer, merely noting his volatility. Hidden demand. She wants him to infer her unstated grievance, perform the emotional labor of decoding her silence, and accept a guilty verdict without a defined claim. She demands mind-reading leadership from him while retaining the tyrant's prerogative to reject direct instruction. Core contradiction. She demands he lead the household while forcing him to follow her unwritten, constantly shifting emotional script. She exerts absolute authority to judge his reaction, while dodging the accountability of stating her original objective. G-ero logic pattern. Emotional continuity across incompatible claims. The immediate feeling of discomfort retroactively rewrites the factual sequence. Reality bends to the imperative of the current mood. GIRL math pattern. Emotional accounting where reciprocity is void. His reaction is taxed as a moral deficit, while her provocation is entirely exempted as irrelevant intent. The ledger balances only when his debt pays for her discomfort. Progichen's pattern. Fear and shame are attributed to the husband as his motive. The fact omitted is her own causal role in the tension. She cannot tolerate the internal sensation of being wrong, so she projects the failure outward onto his reaction. Projective confession. The accusation is an exact mirror of her own action, avoiding direct responsibility while demanding moral labor from him. By naming his reaction as the sin, she confesses her original intent to provoke. Decoding AXs. Axis 1. Feeling becomes verdict. The phrase treats subjective discomfort as settled fact. The speaker shifts from an emotional state to a moral accusation without a testable claim. Fallacy. Appeal to emotion. Male decode, name the feeling, then demand the specific actionable claim. Disciplined response. I hear that this feels important. What exact action are you accusing me of, and what do you want done about it right now? Axis 2. Request becomes test. A practical request is deliberately hidden so the man can fail by not guessing it. The standard is unstated but violently enforced. Fallacy. Mind-reading demand. Male decode, translate the shit test into a direct, observable request. Disciplined response, please ask directly. I respond to clear requests, not hidden tests. What is the specific boundary you are requesting? Axis 3. Projection by accusation. An internal fear is assigned to the man as his motive or character flaw. She reports his inner state without evidence or right. Fallacy, psychic determinism, male decode, separate her fear from his intent. Disciplined response. That is not my motive. Tell me what happened in observable reality, not what you imagine I meant. Let us deal with facts, not your narrative. Counter logos audit. The shame avoided. The shame of being caught in unreasonable demands or failing to communicate like an adult. The scapegoat selected. The husband's tone and reaction masking her original provocation. The duty bypassed. The adult duty of clear, honest communication in mutual respect. The repair owed. If the story stopped spinning, she would owe him an apology for the covert manipulation and provocation. The gains. She gains sympathetic victim status, exempting herself from accountability, maintaining control of the frame, and shifting the focus entirely to his behavior. The sex swap reveal. If a man said this to a woman, it would be universally diagnosed by therapists as DARVO, deny, attack, reverse victim and offender, gaslighting, and emotional abuse. The asymmetry proves the gynocentric bias of the culture. The core principles: timeline before feelings, choice before context, evidence before empathy, confession before forgiveness, restitution before healing language, written facts before emotional fog, boundaries before rescue. No absolution without amendment. Truth begins where the hamster wheel stops. Melee procol. Slow the conversation, refuse the rapid emotional pace she dictates. Ask for the exact claim. Force her to define the charge in objective reality. Separate feeling from fact. Validate her right to feel, but refuse her right to unilaterally define reality. Refuse mind-reading guilt. Do not accept responsibility for her unspoken expectations. Answer one request at a time. Break the gish gallop of emotional complaints into singular, manageable points. Reward direct speech. Only comply with clear, respectful, and honest communication. End contempt loops. Walk away from the interaction if she refuses to operationalize her complaints into logical requests. Decode and debunk. The phrase under forensic examination is, "I never said you did anything wrong. I said it says a lot that you reacted that way." To dismantle this verbal fortress, we apply the trivium. Grammar establishes the boundary of definition. Logic tests the sequence of cause and effect. Rhetoric exposes the motive of the speaker. The term react descends from the Latin reactus, to act back or reciprocate. To say a lot functions as an epistemic judgment, a claim of knowledge derived from interpretation. By stringing these together, the speaker constructs a trap. She formally pardons the initial act while prosecuting the man's response to her own provocation. This is not communication. It is a linguistic snare designed to shift culpability through narrative control. What it sounds like. On the surface, the literal meaning masquerades as magnanimous neutrality. The speaker claims the mantle of an objective jurist. She explicitly states she is not accusing him of a tangible offense. Instead, she frames herself as a passive observer, merely cataloging his emotional volatility. She asserts that her concern is purely analytical. In a good faith context, this might simply be a clumsy attempt to express emotional distance or ask for reassurance. A wife might genuinely feel overwhelmed by a husband's sudden burst of frustration and lacks the vocabulary to say, "Your volume frightens me, and I need us to lower the temperature." If her motive is peace, the awkwardness is forgivable. In a bad faith context, the surface neutrality is a disguise. The therapeutic clinical cadence masks a covert strike. She plays the detached therapist analyzing a feral subject. It sounds reasonable to the untrained ear because it mimics the language of conflict resolution, but it functions as the opening statement in a kangaroo court where the defendant is already guilty of feeling what it is doing. Beneath the verbal patina, the mechanism operates like an ideological precipitate, a catalytic agent that hardens emotional preference into unassailable verdict. The phrase serves multiple tactical functions simultaneously. Emotional and social meaning. Emotionally, she rewrites the timeline. Her provocation evaporates, his response becomes the new genesis event. Socially, she secures the high ground. By framing his reaction as the issue, she signals to any observers, real or imagined, that she remains calm while he is erratic. She elevates her social status at the cost of his dignity. Hidden request. She wants preemptive compliance without issuing a direct order. She demands that he perform the emotional labor of decoding her silence, apologize for his resistance, and submit to her unwritten script of acceptable behavior. The demand is for mind reading. A possible test. This phrase acts as a shit test and a boundary probe. She wants to know if he will grovel, panic, and scramble to justify his emotional state, or if he will remain rooted in his frame. If he scrambles, he fails the test, confirming her unspoken hypothesis that he is emotionally weak and unfit to lead. Hypocrisy. She demands that he lead the household while forcing him to follow her unwritten emotional decrees. She insists on the authority to judge his reaction, while dodging the accountability of stating her objective. Girl logic contradiction. Girl logic demands emotional continuity across incompatible claims. The immediate feeling of discomfort retroactively alters the factual sequence. Mood overrides fact. She feels wronged, therefore he is wrong, even if her feeling originated from a provocation she initiated. Girl math accounting. Girl math recalibrates the moral ledger. His reaction is taxed as a moral deficit, a permanent debit of guilt. Her provocation is entirely exempted as irrelevant intent. The ledger only balances when his emotional debt pays for her transient discomfort. Inductive projection. She observes his external behavior and leaps to a conclusion about his internal state. She inductively infers that his frustration stems from a character flaw, an inherent instability, rather than a rational response to her antagonism. Projective identification. She cannot tolerate the internal sensation of being wrong or out of control. To escape this shame, she projects it outward onto him. She relates to him not as a partner, but as the physical embodiment of her own refused instability. She pressures him to act out the chaos she denies in herself. Projective confession. The accusation is an exact mirror of her own action. By naming his reaction as the cardinal sin, she accidentally confesses her original intent to provoke. She exposes her own refusal to take direct responsibility while demanding moral labor from him. The decoding axes. To map the tactical terrain, we interrogate the three primary axes of this communication. Axis 1. Feeling becomes verdict. The phrase treats her subjective discomfort as objective reality. She experiences a feeling discomfort at his boundary and immediately translates that feeling into a settled moral fact. She shifts from an emotional state to a moral accusation without a testable claim. Male decode. Name the feeling. Isolate it from reality. Discipline. Ask for the exact observable action she is condemning. Axis 2. Request becomes test. A practical request is deliberately hidden, so the man can fail by not guessing it. The standard for acceptable reaction is unstated, unknowable, and violently enforced after the fact. She sets a hurdle she never showed him. Male decode. Translate the covert test into a direct request. Discipline. Demand clear communication. Refuse to compete in a rigged game. Axis 3. Projection by accusation. An internal fear or shame is assigned to the man as his motive or character flaw. She claims to know his inner state, that he is irrationally reactive without evidence or right. She reports on his psychology as a distraction from her behavior. Male decode. Separate her psychological projection from his actual intent. Discipline. Refuse the mind-reading verdict. Force the conversation back to observable facts. The fallacies. This phrase is a masterclass in logical fallacy, deploying several in tight succession. Appeal to emotion. She insists that her emotional reaction to his behavior is the definitive measure of reality. Her discomfort outranks his logic. Mind-reading demand. She expects him to know the exact emotional standard she holds and blames him for failing to meet it. Equivocation. She equivocates between having a reaction and being in the wrong. A reaction is a physiological and psychological response to a stimulus. It is not inherently immoral. She subtly redefines his reaction as a transgression. Kafka trap. He is presented with an unfalsifiable claim. If he defends his reaction, he proves he is reactive and defensive. If he suppresses his reaction, he validates her authority to police his emotions. Darvo, Denis, attack, reverse victim and offender. She denies her provocation, attacks his reaction, and reverses the roles. She becomes the victim of his volatility, and he becomes the offender, despite the chronological reality that she initiated the tension. Unfalsifiability, it says a lot, is purposely vague. It cannot be disproven because it points to no specific metric. It is a therapeutic vapor impossible to grasp, impossible to defeat with logic alone. The male error modes. A man operating under the spell of gynocentrism or therapy speak will fall into several traps when confronted with this phrase. Literalism. He takes her words at face value. He argues the semantics of his reaction, trying to prove he was justified. He fails to see the underlying power grab. Debate brain. He scrambles to present evidence of her provocation, bringing facts to a feelings fight. He argues the timeline, hoping logic will win over a mind governed by narrative. Apology addiction. Terrified of being labeled the bad guy, he immediately apologizes for his tone, his volume, or his frustration. He pays the debt she manufactured, validating her girl math accounting. Rescue fantasy. He assumes she is genuinely hurt and attempts to soothe her, missing the bad faith manipulation. He pours empathy into a bottomless pit of rationalization. Anger as leadership. He explodes, proving her point. He reacts to the provocation with uncontrolled fury, handing her the exact evidence she needed to play the victim. The primary failure is treating every complaint as a command and every feeling as a fact. He rewards indirect aggression with panic. The disciplined response. The disciplined response requires a man to stand firm in the logos. Syllogistically, if an accusation requires a specific transgression and a reaction is not a transgression but a response to a stimulus, then condemning the reaction while ignoring the stimulus is a logical fraud. A man must defeat this manipulation by slowing the tempo, forcing clarity, and refusing the emotional fog. The protocol. Slow the conversation. Do not match her emotional pace. Pause. Let the silence do the work. Ask for the exact claim. Force her to operationalize her vague accusation. What specific action are you accusing me of? What exactly did I do wrong? Separate feeling from fact. Validate her right to an emotion. but refuse her right to define reality. I understand you do not like my tone. That is your preference. It is not a moral verdict. Refuse mind-reading guilt. Do not accept responsibility for her unspoken expectations. I respond to clear requests, not hidden tests. If you want something, ask directly. Answer one request at a time. Break the emotional avalanche into singular, manageable points. Do not let her pivot to a new grievance before the first is resolved. Reward direct speech. Only comply with clear, respectful, and honest communication. Ignore the indirect demands. End contempt loops. If she refuses to clarify and insists on the vague "it says a lot," withdraw from the engagement. I will not be judged by a standard you refuse to define. We can talk when you are ready to be direct. Maxim: truth begins where the hamster wheel stops. No insight, no repair, no trust. Demand the timeline, demand the facts, never apologize to a fog. Male response protocol. The phrase "I never said you did anything wrong. I said it says a lot that you reacted that way" is a therapeutic Molotov cocktail wrapped in a plausible deniability blanket. It is a masterclass in Kafka trapping, where the very act of defending oneself is entered as evidence of guilt. The goal is not resolution. The goal is a verdict based on mind reading, elevating her emotional interpretation of your internal state above your objective actions. This is therapy language capture weaponized for domestic lawfare, turning a conversation into a tribunal where you are guilty of a crime that wasn't committed based on evidence that doesn't exist. To defeat this, a man must deploy the counter logos, timeline before feelings, evidence before empathy, confession before forgiveness. We must weave a protocol of crisp, unyielding rationality, a durable fabric of truth as strong and plain as a colonial-era trade cotton, unbleached and resilient against the stains of emotional manipulation. We will not play the game of girl math, where guilt is calculated by mood. We will enforce the grammar of reality. Here is the male response protocol, one claim at a time. Slow the conversation, the temporal anchor. The tactic: break the momentum. The phrase is designed to rush you into a defensive panic. Refuse the pace. The logic: emotion demands immediate response. Reason requires a pause. By slowing down, you seize the temporal frame. You transition the interaction from her chaotic emotional timeline to your structured logical one. Sample sentence: hold on. I'm going to need a second to parse that because it sounded like a verdict without a charge. Isolate the core claim. Grammatical precision. The tactic: force the vague pronoun "that way" into a specific actionable noun or verb. The logic: the phrase "reacted that way" is a linguistic placeholder. It's empty. She wants you to fill it with your own self-doubt. The word react itself comes from the Latin re, back again, and agere, to act, drive. She is claiming you were driven, i.e. out of control, without stating what the stimulus was. Define the terms before they define you. Sample sentence: when you say "that way," what specific words or actions of mine are you actually referring to? Name one. Separate feeling from fact, epistemic boundary. The tactic: acknowledge the emotion without conceding its factual accuracy or moral authority. The logic: her statement is an attempt to turn a feeling, "I feel you reacted badly," into a settled fact. It says a lot about you. This is the postmodern conflation of subjective experience with objective truth. You must create a firewall between the two. Hurt is not harm. Discomfort is not evidence. Sample sentence: I can see you're upset, but your interpretation of my reaction is your opinion, not a factual report of my character. Demand the direct request. Pragmatic logic. The tactic: unpack the hidden test. Make the unstated standard explicit. The logic: she is not making a direct request for an apology or a change in behavior. She is issuing a shit test disguised as an observation, wanting you to fail by not guessing the correct response. Drag the test into the light. Refuse to play 4D chess when she's not even playing checkers. Sample sentence: are you asking me to apologize for something? If so, state it. I don't respond to riddles. Refuse mind-reading guilt, syllogistic defense. The tactic: reject her claim to know your inner motives. The logic: this is her core fallacy. She claims to know what your reaction says about you, i.e. she is mind-reading. This is an unfalsifiable claim. Syllogism. Premise 1. A person's internal motives are only knowable through direct confession or consistent, observable external actions. Premise 2. You are accusing me of a negative internal state based on your interpretation of a single reaction. Conclusion. Your accusation is therefore an assumption, not a fact, and I reject it. Sample sentence. You are not a mind reader. You don't know what my reaction says about me. You only know what you're choosing to project onto it. Reward direct speech behavioral conditioning. The tactic, only engage with clear, honest communication. The logic, if you engage with her ambiguous emotional manipulation, you reward it. You must create an incentive structure where only direct, truthful speech gets a response. This is how you train reciprocity in communication. Sample sentence. I am always open to discussing a specific problem. I will not engage with vague character assassinations. When you're ready to be specific, I'm here. Set the boundary, natural law and duty. The tactic, establish the limits of acceptable discourse. Define what is and is not on the table. The logic, a boundary is not a punishment. It is a definition of self. It is the load-bearing structure of a household. It marks the line between respectful dialogue and emotional abuse. You have a duty to protect the integrity of the conversation from the rot of passive aggression. Sample sentence. This conversation is over if you continue to imply I'm guilty without stating the crime. My character is not a topic for your subjective speculation. Document serious claims, evidence, and record. The tactic. Treat the accusation with the seriousness of a legal charge, which requires evidence. The logic, therapy language has escaped the clinic and become civilian lawfare. In a world where feeling unsafe can be used to destroy reputations or livelihoods, every claim must be treated as a potential legal or social threat. You must establish that you operate in the realm of evidence, not emotional assertions. Sample sentence, I want to be clear. You are making a serious insinuation about my character. I will treat it with the seriousness it deserves. Please be prepared to back it up with an actual example. Exit circular contempt, rhetorical closure. The tactic, if she refuses to be specific and continues the you know what you did loop, disengage entirely. The logic, this is the left's favorite solvent for reason, the endless circular argument where the lack of a confession is proof of guilt. There is no victory in a contamination loop. Withdrawing your presence is the ultimate veto power against emotional tyranny. It preserves your energy and your dignity. Sample sentence. We're going in circles. I've asked for specifics. You've offered none. I'm stepping away from this until you're ready to communicate like an adult. I'll be in the other room. Maxims for the propos. The hamster spins because the conscience knocked. External locus is accountability in disguise fleeing the scene. Rationalization is the receipt printed after appetite already bought the thing. Projection makes the nearest man wear the mask of her refused shame. No insight, no repair. No repair, no trust. Truth begins where the hamster wheel stops. Axis checklist. Feeling becomes verdict. Name the feeling, then ask for the specific claim. Response. I can hear that this feels important. What exact action are you asking for? Request becomes test. Translate the test into a direct request. Response, please ask directly. I will respond to clear requests, not hidden tests. Projection by accusation. Separate her fear from his intent. Response, that is not my motive. Tell me what happened, not what you imagine I meant. I have walked you through the labyrinth of veiled speech, where every sigh is a ledger and every hesitation is a hidden tax levied against your peace. We have dissected the grammar of evasion, mapped the fallacies of emotional continuity, and stripped the therapeutic jargon down to its skeletal grasping demands. You now see that indirect speech is not a mystery to be solved by a knight-errant. It is a strategy. It is the architecture of a mind that wishes to be led without submitting to being told, to be judged without submitting to a trial, and to keep the emotional ledger balanced while the other party silently pays the toll. We have traded the fog for the scalpel, and in doing so, we have reclaimed the sovereign right to hear clearly without abandoning our center of gravity. When the weather turns and the riddles multiply, Anchor yourself to this single, infallible rule for translating indirect speech. Name the feeling, isolate the claim, and answer the concrete request without ever surrendering the warmth of a steady, unyielding hand. When she speaks in codes, do not guess the lock. Hand her the pen and ask her to write the contract. Acknowledge the reality of her emotion, but sever it from the false verdict she is attempting to pass. Meet her in the valley of her feelings with the complete, grounded empathy of a man who stands firmly on the mountain of fact. Step forward with the unencumbered, purposeful stride of a man who cannot be rattled by a shifting breeze, letting your clarity be the compass that guides the conversation back to solid earth. Truth requires no harshness, but warmth demands no submission. The civilization we inherited was built on the rock of clear covenants, not the shifting sands of moods. Our ancestors understood that language exists to serve reality, not to rearrange it to fit a passing, tempestuous temperament. You carry that logos in your blood now. You will not be dragged into the Kafka trap of unfalsifiable grievances, nor will you mortgage your honor to purchase the cheap illusion of harmony. Hold the line, demand the definitions. Let the hamster wheel screech to a halt, and let the silence do the heavy lifting of truth. And now the sponsored book introduction, Psychology's Wokest turn, the breakdown of reason and sanity. You're holding a weapon, not the kind that leaves bullet casings or bloodstains, but the kind that dismantles lies. I wrote this book because I watched psychology, a field built on reason, observation, and the unflinching pursuit of truth, collapse into a cult of feelings. Let me tell you how it happened. 20 years ago, I sat in a university lecture hall listening to a tenured professor dismiss Freud as a dead white male. Students nodded, scribbling notes about patriarchal toxicity and decolonizing the id. By the time I earned my PhD, entire departments had replaced case studies with critical theory, swapped data for dogma, and declared war on biological reality. Therapists stopped curing patients and started recruiting them. Masculinity became a disorder. Rationality was rebranded as bigotry. And if you dared question it, you weren't unwoke, you were sick. This book is for men who still trust their guts. Men who know a fish can't climb a tree no matter how many pronouns it adopts. Men tired of being told their instincts are harmful by clipboard-wielding ideologues who've never thrown a punch, fixed a carburetor, or survived a day without safe spaces. If you're the type who thinks toxic masculinity sounds like a compliment, read on if you'd rather cry into a gender-neutral stuffy. Put this down now, go knit a uterus hat. Inside, you'll learn how therapy became Maoist struggle sessions, therapy's new red gods, why white heterosexual men are scapegoated for civilization's sins, white male, psychology's public enemy, and how the trauma industrial complex profits by convincing you you're broken. We'll dissect the lunacy of prioritizing lived delusions over hard science, biological reality versus feelings theology, and expose the cowardice of pathologizing stoicism while celebrating victimhood, emotionalism's body count. This isn't self-help, it's unhelp, a demolition guide for the woke mind virus. You'll walk away armed with facts, not mantras. Ready to laugh at absurdity, not apologize for existing. The choice is simple. Keep swallowing lies until your spine dissolves, or fight back. Your sanity's worth the bullet this book fires. Aim well. Psychology's Wokest Turn, The Breakdown of Reason and Sanity, written by Conrad Riker. Buy now, links in description.